Tushar Mahajan of Centrum Broking joins us right now on the show. As good a voice that you can get on derivatives, and joins us on, well, maybe not the monthly expiry day, but the weekly upstream expiry, which is also crucial. Tushar, good having you. Thanks so much for joining in. Notwithstanding the fact that it's a Thursday, but the fact that the last 5 days we've had a move, which is for the first time that we have a 5-day up move since March 2019. How do you think the positions are built, and do you personally reckon that this up move can continue?
So I think there obviously, a large part of this up move has happened on the back of short covering. In terms of flows, you still see foreigners continuously selling, except, a marginal blip that we saw yesterday in terms of buying. So my sense is that, this this bout of covering, which is triggered, by some extent to hopes of a government intervention, and also broadly to some kind of a risk rally globally, could potentially take us around to the 11,100, 11,200 odd levels. But beyond that, I really don't see legs for the market. Today being the 5th day of this move, we are already beginning to see some loss of momentum. We saw some yesterday as well, because overall, if you look at it, the participation was fairly limited. The market was trading really in a very narrow range for most part of the day, which is clearly a sign of confusion. And today as well, it's not really sustaining itself around that highs around 11,080 to 11,100 odd levels. So my sense is that, we are beginning to lose momentum. We could, last legs make a last attempt effort to try and cross the 11,100 level at 150 odd range, but that's about it. So I think we are in all likelihood at the last leg of this recent rally.
All right. Tushar, do you feel that banks and financials will continue to remain the epicenter of all the action that we are to witness in the near term?
Sorry, I beg your pardon, banks and?
Financials, basically NBFCs, and not just the banks. Anything in the financial space.
Yeah, so I think overall, banks are now beginning to catch up of some of their recent underperformance that we saw on the bank Nifty per se. And, that's obviously being led by the large cap private sector banks, and, obviously PSU banks also rallied yesterday. My sense is that, if the Nifty, if the underlying move is that the rally on Nifty has to kind of stall, it will get reflected onto the bank Nifty as well. Bank Nifty could probably inch a little more higher. Right now, we're looking at about 28,000 on the bank Nifty. It's the weekly options expiry as well today, and we've typically seen that bank Nifty, on the options expiry, you see some largish kind of moves on the bank Nifty. So about 28,000, 27,800, that's the range we're looking for bank Nifty, but that's about it. I'm more concerned about the Nifty, which is a much broader index, that, in terms of the Nifty management, the upside looks limited.
Okay. Shorten the arms, every time there is an expectation that some announcement is going to come, that's the time when you see these sectors like real estate and auto start to perk up. Structurally, everyone's been talking about a slowdown in both these industries. Do you believe that if at all there is something that comes in to aid both these sectors, it could shift the mood completely, and then therefore to preempt that and start to build a portfolio with some of these names in it if you don't have them already?
So my sense is that, portfolio building will happen when the numbers start showing through. I think what happens when you're living in hopes of an announcement and all of that is you probably try to start covering your shorts, or you build trading positions. Autos, for example, has had a fairly good run over the last week or so, which is primarily built on the fact that there is hope of some kind of a stimulus or whatever for the sector. But more importantly, I think it's been driven by people who've been short on the sector, been covering themselves, saying that they don't want to be stopped out by any kind of government announcements. So my sense is, in terms of portfolio building, you really have to see how the numbers start flowing through. The kind of move that we've seen right now is really a hope move, which is which has caused short covering. I was looking at some data on Maruti, for example, which has been a stellar performer in the last week, 10 days. Ever since the beginning of the September expiry, you've seen the open interest come down, through the month by about 30%. So when you look at that, you club that with the kind of price action that you see in the stock. It's clearly the fact that a heavily shorted stock, enough of negative sentiment around the sector as such. That it's got the attention of the government. You could have something coming through, so you're better off cutting your shorts, and that's exactly the kind of move which has resulted in the sharp move in Maruti, for example.
Tushar, there is also this, I think before I came in for the show, I heard that there is apparently going to be a conference or a meeting from the finance minister tomorrow as well, apparently in Mumbai. And my question is, when these series of meetings are slated to come up one after the other, is it possible for traders to go out and take positional shorts, and in the absence of that, would there be a lack of heavy shorting which might actually work for the bulls if they want to take stock specific bets? The markets may remain slightly more benign, even if it's tired, will not correct too much because people will not take shorts, and therefore stock specific longs might work better.
So I think what is, to answer your question, I think effectively what is happening is that the market is appreciative of the fact that finally the slowdown has caught government's attention, and there is the slew of meetings or slew of at least efforts being made to revive the economy, and the overall economic activity revival is being spoken about. So I agree with you that in such a scenario, aggressive shorting would not be a wise thing to do, and that could to some extent limit the the downside in the market. But remember that large constituent of the market, which is the foreign investors, they have been selling the market, and when that view is not determined on what kind of policy announcements are going to come through. So it's also the lack of heavy lifted buying which is happening, which is right now limited only to the hand of domestic inflows, which is supporting the market. So while there could be a case that given that there are these slew of announcements, so the risk reward is not in favorable of the of people to short. At the same time, the flow or the momentum is not in favor of the buyers as well. So that's where you look at these kind of largish kind of moves, about 400-500 points on the index every time, but it begins to fade away on either sides in that case.
Standing out, Tushar, as a trade, a theme, a sector, a stock that is, or a set of stocks which are standing out the most to your mind today?
Today,
yeah.
So I think
what I mean is,
we're seeing a lot of action on the end. Yeah, so I think right now there is, my sense is that the long play on the autos has played out. The kind of move that we've seen, I think the short covering led move and all of that, that's kind of pretty much played out. I don't see that announcements is going to lift the auto stocks per se. Be it, let's say, a GST rate cut or whatever. I think people are going to now look at how sales numbers begin to pan out, and that is going to be critical. I think other than that, there still seems to be some room for housing finance companies and real estate companies. I think that's the other sector which has been grabbing a lot of headlines of late. And we haven't seen, except statements that something will be announced, we haven't really seen anything coming through. So I think it's all linked. So real estate and housing finance companies, those are two kind of sectors which I would probably closely watch out for, and try and trade on the long side based on what the government has to say. Other than that, I think we were today in a day like today, we are seeing reasonable amount of action with names like Indigo and all. I don't know what's triggering that, but I think that those are stocks which have caught our attention today.
Got that. Tushar, we leave it at that. Thank you so very much for joining us this afternoon. Really appreciate you taking out the time.